Cool. Hi, my name is Shravan Balaji. I am an alum of East Brunswick High School. I currently attend the University of Pennsylvania, where I've sold my soul and I am studying finance. So right now, I'm here and I'm going to try and convince you why you should become a political guru. This is really especially for the students out there in the audience, although I'm sure converting a few adults wouldn't be too bad either. But we'll see how this goes. So before I start, there's just two ground rules that I want to set, both for myself and for the audience. First off, for myself, I'm going to try and avoid divulging my own personal opinions, and there are a lot of them, to this audience as much as I can. Reason being for that is I think that it's much better for everybody if you kind of form your own opinions without me kind of guiding you and nudging you in a certain direction. The other thing is, I want everyone in the audience to keep an open mind throughout this presentation. There are going to be elements that you'll disagree with, and some that maybe you'll vehemently disagree with. But even if that's the case, try and keep an open mind. If we are going to have reasonable civic discourse at any level, we need an open mind from both the people in the audience, myself, and anyone else who might be watching. So, as we proceed, I simply ask for you to keep that in mind. So, first off, what is a political guru? And I'm going to consult my favorite source, Urban Dictionary, here. A political guru is someone who knows what colored jocks that a certain candidate might wear. That's a pretty specific piece of information. I personally don't know what any of the candidates are really wearing down there. However, with that being said, I do like to think that I know enough to consider myself informed. And really, my journey starts from two sources. One, my dad, when I was 2, gave me presidential trading cards, kind of like baseball cards, except with information of presidents. And those of you who might know me would be like, yeah, that definitely happened. So, based off that was kind of a big influential factor, because that really got me interested, even at age 2, of who these people were, how they were relevant to my life, and what really made them special and important in the eyes of the entire world. The other major thing, and this is actually going to require some participation on your part, includes the variety of teachers that I've had at East Brunswick High School that have made me care so much about these issues. I'm going to ask that all of you give them a huge hand right now for all the work that they do in making sure that civic education here is as good as it could possibly be. They've earned it. All right, so let's look at the current state of affairs in terms of voter turnout, in terms of kind of how people approach the issues, and why we're not necessarily in the best possible state. So, as you can see, electoral turnout in the U.S. is fairly low, kind of peaking at around 60% overall. And when you compare that with a country like Mali, where after they finally got the right to vote, 90% of the people turned out, especially in the hot desert, to show up and vote, this is abysmally low. But what's even worse is the youth turnout. Young people simply don't get out and vote and make their opinions heard as much as other demographics. And you can see kind of the generational divide, as young people are less likely to be involved in politics and less likely to actually take a stand on some of these issues. So that all kind of contributes as to why maybe people of a younger generation aren't as active and as involved as we'd like them to be. So why? I mean, that sad pug right there really wants to know why, right? Perfect. So one of the biggest things is the fact that we have a very strong emphasis on standardized testing from a young age. And that causes our students to compartmentalize that information, place less value in really appreciating it for its beauty and for its value outside of the test, and really forces them to use it simply for their rote memorization as it comes to the textbook. That's really not what we want out of civic education. That's really not what we want when it comes to teaching history and politics and things like this. This stuff should be understood. This stuff should be easy to access. This stuff should be fun. And while not everyone can be as interested in this stuff as the other, everyone should care. No matter what career path that you go down, you're going to end up voting, hopefully. And when you do, we want you to be able to make that right decision. The second thing is, people are confused, they're lost, they don't know where to go. There's a lot of really political angst amongst the youth today. part of that comes from the fact that there's so much information saying all sorts of confusing things that really kind of muddles our senses as to what reality is. So when you're just confused and you feel like Mark Wahlberg in Dazed and Confused, it's a little bit more difficult for you to actually get involved. The third thing is mob mentality. Generally, there's something that's in with people who are young and something that's not so in. And over time, we've seen that certain candidates have really captured the vision of young people. In 2008, 2012, it was Barack Obama. In 2016, it's Bernie Sanders. And while many young people have excellent reasons for supporting these candidates, others are a little bit confused, a little bit wary of sharing their own opinions or even exploring what their opinions might be and end up falling into this giant rat pack. And that doesn't contribute to civil discourse any better than not saying anything at all does. So there's also the example of taking it too far. And this is a scene from the 1968 Democratic National Convention, which is known for being one of the most riot-filled instances in our political history. Young people, many of them who were with the counterculture movement of the time, were working together and to protest kind of the actions of the Johnson administration in the Vietnam War. And what ended up happening was that the protests turned violent, incredibly violent. There were protesters smearing feces across the faces of police officers with incredible disrespect that people back home, the silent majority, as Richard Nixon would put it 4 years later, really were turned off by this display of youth activism. Therefore, many people in our political establishment have decided that it might be better for young people to stay home as opposed to getting involved and causing more ruckus, as seen here. So that's another big kind of issue when it comes to the youth being involved in politics. When it's not just simply not knowing enough or a mob mentality, it's also the fact that some of the actions have gone too far, and people in general have decided it's better to play safe than sorry, to not speak up, rather than to go overboard and cause something like this. So how are we going to fix this? How are we as a society, or even you as an individual, going to kind of take it upon yourself to change this? Step one is simple. Get informed. You have excellent sources of information in this day and age. You have your teachers, you have your parents, you have these wonderful news sources. The Wall Street Journal, which leans a little bit more conservative, the New York Times, which is a little bit to the left, and both of these publications do a lot, especially for people who are trying to get informed. There's great information, there's great op-eds. You can learn so much from these sources. You don't even just have to limit them to the old-style news sources as well. There's all sorts of information on places like Reddit, 4chan, etc. And by understanding what these sources have, what these well-respected traditional, really focuses of great journalism and political information, you can really change your mindset and increase the amount of information that you hold in your head. What's the second thing you can do? Talk to people. Have a conversation with people you disagree with, people who you might have no idea with what you're talking about, people whose opinions you don't know. On my way here, I was driving from upstate New York, from Mount Marcy, the highest peak, and sitting in my car was myself, an Indian American from New Jersey, a friend who was from Texas, of Scotch-Irish settlers who came over in the 1800s, one of my friends who was Peruvian and lived in Minnesota for 4 years, but that's all about his exposure to the United States really is. And one of my friends is the son of a Japanese immigrant. And all these factors made us have very different views from where we grew up to our ethnic composition to the experiences that we've had in our lifestyle. But we were able to talk and understand where each other came from. And when you are able to understand where the person sitting across from you, or maybe even not even sitting anywhere near you, can come from on an issue, you'll be able to better defend your position in this argument, as well as understand why other people hold the opinions that they do. For the most part, most opinions are held with good reason, with the idea that this is something that's in my benefit, or for what I believe to be in society's benefit as a whole. And that's why it's important to talk. I included the second picture right there about political arguments on Facebook, which I have a penchant for getting into, unfortunately. Thank God no one from college admissions saw that. But basically, I actually like Facebook arguments. Here's why. And this is a bit unorthodox. But when you're on Facebook, when you're on social media, and you're trying to have a conversation, you're forced to temper yourself. You're forced to make sure that you don't say anything rash or irrational or possibly prejudiced, right? You're forced to ensure that you can have a meaningful conversation, that you don't look bad in front of the entire internet, and this forces you to argue without resorting to the same attacks that many political conversations end up being. So, considering that, it may not be the worst idea to experiment with social media on a smaller level. Another big part about having these conversations is to ensure that you're not throwing around labels that may dissuade someone from speaking. Using terms like racism, homophobia, sexism, all of those things are very real in our society and we have to address them. But if you attempt to put down someone's argument by attaching an ism to what they're saying, then you simply end up devaluing your own argument because you're showing that you can't do anything but resort to these somewhat shameful tactics. If it's accurate, use it. Call someone out. But don't do it just because you disagree with someone and just because you want to make them look bad. The third thing to getting involved is to actually get involved. Go work on a campaign. Go host a convention. Go meet with people. Here you have 3 alumni of East Brunswick High School, or rather, well, 2 alumni and 1 student, but you have 3 people associated with this high school who I think have done a good job of getting involved and caring about these issues. The first one right there is Aviv Havich, the shorter one to the left right there, with Milo Yiannopoulos, a noted firebrand conservative editor for Breitbart News, who's currently going around America on a tour which name I really shouldn't really repeat on the stage. But Milo Yiannopoulos is one of the more controversial figures today, and he spoke at Rutgers a few months ago in February. And even though this was marked with controversy, there were many protests, this allowed for greater discourse and for opinions to be heard. And Aviv was able to bring that to Rutgers, a large state school. He affected thousands of people, and that's one example of really getting involved. The second example is of Dennis Sherian, a junior right here in East Brunswick High School. I hope he did well in all his AP exams and stuff, but right now, Dennis has started this political club, which has really taken form in one of the more impactful things in East Brunswick, starting with debates with students representing candidates, to canvassing in New Hampshire by working with certain campaigns. Dennis has really allowed a lot of his fellow peers to get involved and care about the political process. The third person is myself. That's me at the National Constitution Center back in September. Photo credits to my roommate, Ben Warsham. If he's watching this, love you, Ben. But this was me essentially talking about my views about the Iran deal. And this is something that I think was significant because it was one of the most controversial topics of the time and still is today. And I was able to get a chance to express my views while being interviewed and later seeing that interview on NBC Philadelphia, which is very cool. And I was very proud of myself for getting involved, for caring, and for actually kind of making a difference, for fighting for what I believed in. So, I have one final challenge for everyone out there. I've said a lot of things today. Some of them you might agree with, some of them you might not, and that's okay. We want to disagree. But my final challenge for you is sometime within the next week, the next month, the next half year, whenever you feel comfortable, have a conversation regarding the political issues of our time. And as a young person, there are many to care about. Talk about education. Talk about the budget that's currently being discussed in our own township. Talk about the many issues with healthcare in our country. Talk about debt, how we're continuously racking up trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. Talk about financial regulation. Many of you will end up going and working in some of the same institutions that caused the crisis of 2008. Talk about these issues. These are all relevant to you. And I hope that you take the chance to complete my challenge. Because I think once you start getting informed, once you start talking about these issues, maybe you'll feel comfortable one day to fight for these issues yourself. When you're young, everyone tells you, oh, you could be president someday. But that's actually true. Any one of you here, provided you meet the requirements of the Constitution, of course, could be president. And that's one of the most beautiful things about our country. So start caring, get informed, start talking, and then fight for what you believe in. That's really all I have to say right now, and I hope I convinced you That's why you should become a political guru. Thank you very much.